Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first of the series of webinars that we're hosting as part of the kind of communications package from the Decolonizing Education for Peace in Africa project. The project itself is a network cluster project which is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. And it's got a lot of partners. So we started off with 4 sort of core partners in 4 countries. And now we have extended, I think, to 14 countries. The project is trying to look at the values and knowledges of peace and how they can be incorporated into education systems and for informal education in order to support, to support peace. Now, the idea behind this is that we often think of Africa as a continent of conflict, but we thought actually Africa is also a continent full of peace. So how do we kind of recover, recuperate, and use that, deploy that in order to actually think through peace and education for peace? So that's the kind of the aim of the project. The project also believes in the use of arts in this program. Why arts? In many ways, this is because arts, in some ways, is a formula, if you like, for being more than a human being, right? It is. It compels recognition in ways that perhaps other forms of text don't, and it compels recognition that is not easily understandable or expected. For instance, you might see a piece of art and you may make something of it, which is quite different from that somebody else does. That kind of openness, we believe, provides the opportunity for us to utilize the kind of, for art to be utilized to produce education for peace. It introduces us to being human in new ways. Of course, it also risks overwriting and overdrawing. So it is not without risks. You could end up making something of the art which perhaps it goes against the grain. So there is a lot here to be discussed about how art can be used for education and for peace. And I think, and I'm really grateful to our colleagues here today, to Umut Errol, who's a colleague from the Open University, who herself has done a lot of work on arts-based methodologies, and also to several members of the team who are involved in our project in multiple ways. So I'd like to welcome you all here today, and thank you so much to each of you for who also attending this, and we look forward to really thought-provoking questions from you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Parvati, for a very brief thumbnail sketch of the project and for the welcome and introduction. So my name is Umut Errol. I'm professor of sociology at the Open University, and my role today is just to chair this webinar on arts-based methods in decolonial research. Let me just start with a little bit of housekeeping. So the event is being recorded and it will be made available afterwards on the DEPA website, which we'll share with you in a moment in the chat. So you can access it yourselves there or point colleagues there who might be interested. The Q&A, question and answer box is open. So you can add your questions, comments, reflections, also your own experiences if you wish to the throughout the event, and we will collate it and come back to it later. You can you're encouraged to follow the DEPA project on Twitter, and again we'll share that with you in the chat box in a moment. So let me just give you a quick idea of how we are planning to run the event. So we are starting with 15-minute presentation from our panelists. There's a slight change to the order. It will be Bolin Chambeleng to start, and Dr. Silvestre Nzabawanayo, who will speak second, and Ketema Degefa will speak third. And after this, we've prepared a few questions that panelists will discuss amongst themselves. And after that, we'll open to Q&A. So let me just start by introducing Wolin Chabaileng. He's a versatile multi-instrumentalist. He's a composer and percussionist with 20 years of experience touring the globe as an ambassador of African sound, who shares and collates African indigenous instruments. He's an amazing performer, teacher, and producer. And he is a multi-talented and versatile international percussionist. Wally studied music at Sibikwa Arts Center from 2001 and at the UNISA. He has also worked with Drama for Life for 5 years as playback theater musician. His musical genius resonates from a rather versatile perspective and the influence of world diverse sounds. He played music both in Africa, Europe, and Asian countries, and his tours include India, Belgium, Holland, Germany, France, Australia, and many, many more. So welcome, Wally. You've got the word. And I will just remind you when 15 minutes are over. That's what I will do with all our speakers, so you can focus on your talking and don't have to check the time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me take this opportunity and greet everyone around the world who's watching. And I'm so happy to be part of this project and this afternoon to sit here and chat to you. Of course, they introduced me. My name is Boli Chabaileng, born in a rural area where I grew up playing indigenous instruments. And of course, in my early age, I did not even think I'm gonna make it as a professional career. It was just fun as a cultural activity. But today I'm just so glad to be here. So yeah, I'm good at playing music, not talking, but I'll try to talk. See if I can reach 15 minutes. But yeah, basically for me, decolonization in my sector as creative and art, it's important and let me say a very critical and sensitive topic, because we experience it in a hard way in Africa, or where I come from, in a sense of the colonizers stepped in Africa and introduced a system that at some point is working against us, it's working against the progress also of African, and you have to live in it. And for you to survive, you need to fit in the system for you to kind of interpret yourself as an African. So okay, I'll just talk about music. So most of the instruments I play, they are mainly made out of tree. They are from the bush. So it can be marimba, it can be drum, that is made out of the shell of the tree, and the animal skin, and then the person who plays the drum brings the life into the drum. And we have almost in fact, all African instruments are made from the tree. But even though in the modern days we modernize them and using ropes and other things that can really, because of the civilization, we have towns and the buildings around the bushes. So we experiencing the time whereby we need more of trees. So we save them by using other elements and other instruments, and modernize and using sometimes fiberglass to create some calabash instead of just going for a tree. So because of that, we play most of African instruments these days are made of, they're modernized, if I can put it like that, but originally are made out of the tree. So decolonization for me means we need to just tap into ourselves and find ourselves and find the voice and speak as an African and share with the world who we are. So and when we talk about peace and art, for me, you can't really separate peace from art because they are one thing. So when you play music, it's either you make people to stop, like you grab people's attention by playing that music because they sit and listen to you, and then by doing that, you tap into their thinking, and you unify them. Like if, let me say, I'm performing for thousands of people and I'm in church on stage, they all look at me, so I unite them. Like the music becomes a point of unity, like the focus point, and that makes everyone focus on the artist who's performing, and automatically it's kind of a symbol of peace because we are united by one person who's performing. So art, for me, it's the best tool, you know, to kind of interpret like the best interpretation of peace. And okay, from where I grew up, we communicate through the instruments. Like there's a horn, a good horn that when you hear it in the middle of the night or in the morning, we know that this horn is summoning us to go to the king or to the Graal. So there's a problem, or there's an issue that the king is calling us to come and gather in that cross to solve the problem. So the communication, sometimes we use the horn to summon everybody to come to the party, to say there's a call, let's go and meet and solve the problem in the community. And sometimes there's a certain kind of a drum. When you hear it, the melody from the drum will tell you that something is coming, it's something secret. So no kids or no women should be on the street. They must hide themselves because only men are allowed to be on the street because of the voice of the drum. So the art is so important in a cultural, an African culture, in terms of communication and bringing peace and unifying people. So for the past years, I've been working with communities whereby we create music together. We will have different patterns as a reference from the cultural, where I come from, the Sepedi tribe, Bapedi tribe. We play the pipes, the pan pipes. So when we play them, we can be 100 men, but we will divide them into groups. And then this part will play a certain melody, and this one will play certain melody. But at the end of the day, we play one song. We will unify us. So we use music as a part of what in a modern days we call it team building. So where now we're invited by a company to say, Voli, come and do team building, and we have a drum circle. We drum together, but the team building, actually, it has been a long existing in Africa before the colonization as a way of life. Because in Africa, it's natural. We have something called Ubuntu. It's you are who you are because of me. In my village where I come from, I know my neighbor. They know their neighbors. So in that case, it kind of reduced crime because you can know, you are able to know your almost the whole community. So you can't do anything wrong because you know they will know you. It's not like in modern days where you live in an urban area, you don't even know, sorry, you know your neighbor, you are alone there, and the cultural, what's the right way? The cultural environment or the cultural structure doesn't allow you to know each other and to communicate. Where I come from, I'm in the urban, I'm in Pretoria right now, but I stay in a kind of a location whereby we try to work as a community. And in the middle of the night, we have the whistle. Every house have a whistle, whereby if you feel like someone is breaking into your house, and then you can hear, you just whistle, and the whole community will come out. So in a modern era, we're using the whistle to communicate through the community. But the whistle it's part of music, it's part of art, you know. But in the older days, we used to communicate through drums, music, and even today, when I go to the rural areas and there's an initiation school, we know that this song, when they sing this song, it means the men are coming from the mountain, are coming down. So this song, when the men are coming down, no women should see them, or even when the women are coming down, no men should be on the street because they will beat you. It's because you are not allowed to see their secret as women. So art, nowadays, it's fun, it's music. We touch emotions, we perform, we celebrate, we go to concerts. Some they forget their problems through art. But in the older days, it was more than that. Before colonization, it was more than just the funness of going to the stadium and see volley perform with a live band and have some drinks and have fun and go home. So it's so secret. It's so close to African, like it's Africans' hearts, if I can put it like that. So art, it's a best tool for peace. It's the best tool to communicate the message of the decolonization. But for me, I can talk a lot about how decolonization affected me in a bad way, because okay, now I'm trying to speak English, but I'm a baddie, but I'm speaking English so that you can understand me. But in effect, if I speak my language, nobody may not understand. I will need the interpreter. But that doesn't mean I'm lesser of intelligence because I'm speaking English, not my tongue. But the conversation made us forget who we are. In terms of music, what happened to me is that I did music, African music, but I went into kind of formal study. And when I was doing the formal study, there was a time whereby I was told that when we want to do a certain grade in music, you need to now start to play piano. And as inquisitive as I am, I started to ask, why must I do piano? Why can't I just do marimba as an African instrument to measure with it? And I found that it's like, no, you need to do piano for you to pass in this system. Then sitting down, I realized that colonization did not only kind of made our culture look small, they kind of put a very beautiful system that enable us to kind of find our voice. For me to be the best musician, I need to go through a Western system that teach me to lose myself as an African so that I can be accepted in a system of Western. For example, as an African, we have a way of singing. And after I started to do more of Western classical and major scale, when I go home, I sat down when women and grannies are singing, and I started to question them, thinking that, wow, you are singing very wrong. But again, I told myself that what I mean when I say they're singing so wrong, because they're still singing the kind of old songs from the traditional song from the old generation that they grew up playing them without knowing the major scale or pentatonic scale or all kind of scale that Western has. But because I went through a certain teaching that made me understand tonic solfa or major scale. So everything outside major scale for me started to feel so wrong. And I started to say, no, I think I'm doing something wrong here. I need to go back and collect African instruments and learn from grannies who have been playing this, and so that I become more authentic. But again, because of colonization, when you become authentic and start to play indigenous African instruments, the system don't accept you because they look at you as an educated somebody, because you're not having a master's or degree in music, specializing in composition, learning a Western system. So it's kind of, if I can say, it's a well orchestrated system that maybe for me, I would be happy if through music we can express ourselves and decolonize ourselves and decolonize the art that can bring the peace that was there in the 1800s before, sorry, I don't know how the right reference of when decolonization stepped in Africa right now, but kind of going back before colonizers stepped in Africa and changed the system and put the system that works better in their favor, if I can put it like that. My wish is to have art as tool of peace and as the better weapon to bring back the Ubuntu. You know, the umbrella of Ubuntu represents peace, because you cannot stay with your neighbor and not know your neighbor, because that's where peace starts. Because your neighbor can protect you, and your neighbor from the other side can also protect you. Then as a community, you protect each other. As a community, you speak as one voice, and you become one peace community. So when you hear a song this side, you support this side, then you are one big peaceful community. Yeah, if I can put it like that. So I think I've said enough. I'm not sure if I can pass this time. I told you I'm more of a performer than a speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wally, for a really, really, really interesting reflection and sharing with us your practice as well as your learning. That's been really great, and also for, of course, super timekeeping. So let me invite Dr. Silvestre Nazahawaranayo, who is an associate professor in philosophy of education at the University of Rwanda College of Education. He holds a postdoctoral certificate in curriculum studies from the University of Johannesburg and a PhD in philosophy of education at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. His research interest is about citizenship education, peace and values education for young people in conflicted communities. Also, he has interests in decolonizing peace education, where he considers issues related to unpacking the relevance of indigenous peace education knowledges, philosophies, and practices as a way of addressing epistemic injustices. His PhD thesis is about Itorero, a revived non-formal citizenship education program for high school leavers in post-genocide Rwanda. May I invite you?
Thank you very much, Mut, for the introduction. It's my pleasure to be with you all for this particular webinar, to share a few ideas with you about decolonization. And I would like to use the projects I have been running as a framework to demonstrate how I understand really decolonization. So let me just share my slide.
Thank you. You can see it now.
Oh, you can see. Good. Thank you very much. I've been running a number of projects using arts-based approaches. And in what follows, I would like to describe very briefly some of these projects. And using a kind of deductive approach, I would like to use these projects and define what I would understand as decolonization. So the first project I've been running, it's a project which seeks to use music, dance, and drama in secondary schools as a tool for learning. Here we are producing a CPD certificate for secondary school teachers in teaching and learning using music, dance, and drama. I'm referring here to the Rwandan music, dance, and drama. What we are doing here is a way of demystifying teaching and learning, where a secondary school teacher prepares the lesson together with an artist. And the expectation is here that the materials being delivered in the classroom will be familiar and context specific to the learner in such a way that the categories, the meanings, the symbols that the teacher uses reflect the understanding or the daily environment of the learner. And here we are taking decolonization with education in the sense of decolonizing education, understood as decolonizing the curriculum, but also teaching pedagogies. The second project is called Map at Home, where we are providing psychosocial support through Rwanda cultural art forms. This project actually was initiated in the context of COVID, where we asked ourselves how best we can support young people in terms of psychosocial support in a context where people were locked in their homes. And we thought of using local cultural art forms, music, dance, drama, but also painting and drawing to provide psychosocial support to young people using not only arts-based approaches, but also using digital platforms. We gave them smartphones and we created a digital platform which they used actually to communicate themselves, to communicate between themselves, and we followed them up, providing support using various art forms. The third project is called Building Cultures of Peace in Rwandan Schools, using arts-based approaches. In this project, really, what we are doing was to understand how peace is understood in the context of a school, and then how the understanding of peace can be fostered using arts-based approaches. Here, the idea was to ask learners to make images, songs, poems about the understanding of peace in schools. And we also devised methods for the understanding of peace to be fostered in schools, either through the curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, taking care of children with disabilities, discipline, assessment in schools, and so on. So here we are decolonizing education for peace in schools. While in the previous project about mental health, it was a way of decolonizing and demystifying mental health provision. The fourth project, which is funded by UNDF, UN Democracy Fund, it's about promoting youth engagement with the policymakers through performing arts. And here we are targeting decolonizing youth civic engagement. In this project, we are creating safe spaces through which young people using various art forms can engage with the policymakers on two main issues. One, issues that are hampering democracy in their respective communities, but also issues that go against human rights in their communities. And here art really becomes like a dialogic tool, a two-way form of communication between young people and the policymakers. And the target here, it is really decolonizing youth civic engagement. The fifth project is called Using Arts-Based Approaches to Dialogue Issues of Sustainable Development, SDGs. And here we are targeting mainly two aspects: girls' access to education and poverty reduction. It has been found that the discourse around SDGs is adult-dominated, and young people's voices are given little to no attention. In this project, we have created safe spaces for young people in schools to voice their perspectives around obstacles to girls' access to education and poverty reduction using arts-based approaches, music, dance, drama, drawing, theater, and so on. And here we are really targeting decolonizing SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. As these projects demonstrate, our understanding of decolonization is really very broad. Decolonizing education, curriculum and teaching pedagogies, decolonizing mental health provision, decolonizing education for peace in schools, decolonizing youth civic engagement, here we are in politics, but also decolonizing sustainable development goals. Now, drawing from these projects, allow me to share my views as to what I understand by decolonization. Here are some of the artworks we have been producing in our project, for instance, on mental health. I understand decolonization in three ways. The first way is epistemological, and I would say here that here decolonization really means recognizing that indigenous forms of knowledge are valuable. Indigenous forms of knowledge, beliefs, and practices are valuable, and therefore they can be retrieved, updated to today's context, and serve a number of different purposes. And in that way, in that epistemological sense, decolonization allows us to go against what I call epistemic violence or epistemic injustice, where only forms of knowledge from the West tend to be taken as those ones who are valid, which are valid. So recognizing those indigenous forms of knowledge as valid, as valuable, retrieving them, elevating them, and updating them to today's context so that they can serve different purposes is what really I understand as the decolonization in the first sense. In the second sense, I understand also decolonization in terms of inclusion. Inclusion. Here, I understand decolonization as giving space and room to voices of those who have been marginalized for a long time. Those who have been marginalized for a long time. Those who have no space to voice their perspectives, to voice their understanding of reality on different issues. In addition to epistemology and inclusion, I understand also decolonization in terms of pedagogy, methods. The idea here is to say that decolonization means, for me, taking into consideration context-specific, context-sensitive symbols, representations, meanings, categories, as we think of producing, as we think of creating institutions, producing programs, or developing policies. Basically, that's what I wanted to say in terms of decolonization. And as I have demonstrated, this understanding is grounded from my engagement with various projects. I look forward to a continued conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvester, for a really thought-provoking and inspiring presentation. That's been fantastic. And again, of course, for great timekeeping. So we'll have more time to hear about your projects in detail in the discussion. So let me invite our third speaker, Ketima de Gefa is a PhD student of anthropology at the Vrije University Amsterdam. His research focuses on how sociocultural practice is central to understanding child health and well-being in rural Ethiopia, and it focuses on nutritional vulnerability. He worked on the DEPA project, Gender-Based Violence and Health, using participatory art methods, photo voice, and theater for development. The project worked with communities to develop educational materials through a decolonial approach to transform secondary school students' understanding of gender-based violence and conflict resolution. The project highlighted the importance of understanding and building on local experiences and knowledge to develop educational materials to reduce gender-based violence. From 2018 to 2022, he coordinated the social science branch of Hararge Health Research, a collaboration between the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Haramaya University. Ketima, may I invite you?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Ketima. I'm from Ethiopia. I've been working on DEPA project, and particularly to decolonize gender-based violence in secondary schools. In our context, I will share you how I understand decolonization by itself, particularly in education system, and especially in pedagogical and curriculum context. So when we see from the start in our side, we focused mainly on how gender-based violence is understood from the social context and how local people give meaning to gender equality and gender issues and related to gender empowerment. So overall, we understand that societal values, norms, indigenous knowledge are as essential as West way of like explaining peace, education, and everything. We try to understand and explore how local people understand peace, particularly related to gender-based violence, and how women by themselves are thinking themselves as part of the community. So we did the DEPA project, especially in particular in Ethiopia. We worked with the local non-governmental organizations, like the local non-governmental organizations mainly work on family planning, health education, awareness creation on gender health and the issues. They also work with adolescents, especially on peace education, particularly in secondary schools. Then we did like a kind of community workshop in order to understand how the community by themselves understand peace, particularly in secondary schools. We collected qualitative data from different community groups, from teachers, students, women and the men, clinical service provider, from gender focal persons, in order to understand their perspective, how they think peace should be and how they explain from their indigenous knowledge. Overall, in this project, we understand that, especially in secondary schools, gender violence is very common. Majority of girls are drop out from secondary schools, and still girls are facing challenges in order to attain educations. So from the decolonization point of view, personally, I feel that even the educational itself by itself is like something came from the Western point of view, and the way like African knowledge, indigenous knowledge is almost controlled during the colonial era, and all the curriculum, all the texts, all the materials, we share different curriculum from the Western educational system. And personally also, I feel that the educational system nowadays we are using is also something almost embedded in during colonial era. That's why our aim of this project is to produce educational materials in the way girls and boys are understand gender-based violence using their values, their knowledge. And this knowledge, these educational materials can serve to better understand and prevent gender-based violences in their contexts. And in order to understand gender-based violence, like we did qualitative data collection, then as part of dissemination process, we plan to use photo voice and theater for development as a way to easily share information of how peace is in local, how people understand the peace through theater art plus through photo voice activities. And especially participatory art methods used to disseminate the findings and raise awareness how especially secondary schools, local communities, teachers even can maybe adjust some kinds of curriculum in order to teach gender-based violence, and also to rethink and reshape how boys and girls can like rethink violence in different way and understand and solve the problem. So we did theater for development first. We did 3 theater for development so that local schools and students are understand the peace. We trained local women and the men to do theater by themselves. Like our plan was to co-produce how local people understand peace, rather than like bringing the Western hegemonic discourse of what peace is and how peace is understood. And rather, instead, we prefer to give a space for the local people to create different scripts to teach on gender-based violence. The script is already developed by local actors. We create the story, and then we rank all the stories. Then almost all the participants agreed, and we turned up the story through the play with those local peoples. In this context, we understand that especially artists are much more easier to break very cultural sensitive issues, even to teach in very smooth way, rather than providing a kind of a lecture way of teaching. For instance, one of the issues, especially in decolonization approaches, most of the time students are, it's exam-based, the teaching process is exam-based, it's not participatory. And at the same time, competition is very high. There's no way to express their thoughts, their feelings, and their interest. So in this context, we try to decolonize a bit so that local students can participate in art methods. They create the story by themselves, they turn the story into the practice, they share the information by themselves. So we co-created all gender-based violence issues related to the DEPA projects. And in this context, we use also photo voice. As you understand, photo voice is a kind of practice to produce knowledge and enable people to share their views and their understanding in the way that they can understand peace rather than viewing peace from the Western hegemonic or Western discourse. So it's much better if they share their feelings and their interests, what they have. In this context, we also bring like women to discuss critically on how gender-based violence is impacting women's health, how gender violence by itself is impacting the educational systems, and in the larger umbrella, how gender-based violence by itself is impacting the teaching and the learning process, even with teachers, with the local peoples. And personally, I feel that the art images, particularly the photo voice approach, is creates a space even for women to speak out their issues, their problems, rather than someone speak about their issues, their problems. They engaged, they participate in all issues related to gender-based violences. In this context, we did a different kinds of workshop, like we did a workshop with the community members, with local elders, religious leaders participated in the discussions. We brought the issue to local educational office, so that they can easily teach like secondary school students using educational materials. And we brought discussions with higher officials, like higher governmental officials, so that they can approve for us the educational materials, particularly focused on gender-based issues. Then after all the discussions, we included local values, local knowledges, how they can negotiate peace, how they can work together, how gender violence is reduced, how all women issues or women empowerment is reduced, how different risk factors can be prevented with different workshop participants. Finally, we agreed on the educational material on toolkits. And basically, the toolkits, the educational material we developed is focusing to give space for girls and for women to speak about their problems, to mitigate and reduce gender-based violence at school using their own knowledge rather than like bringing like Western understanding of what peace is and what gender by itself, even gender is different from context to context. So we bring all the toolkit together so they can easily understand and learn from, because they already participate in the material. They are the one who creates the material, all their views, their norms, their values, including the educational materials. So the educational the educational office also agreed on the educational materials we prepared. Secondary school teachers agreed on the educational material prepared. Even they feel that to reprint the educational materials so that other secondary schools can get the materials. And even we create a platform and we give insight for the local NGO to use the educational materials to teach peace, especially in the schools, to work with the adolescents, to work with women, girls, and boys. So in our project, educational materials provide a very good opportunity, even teachers to contribute to their knowledge and input it in the educational materials. And at the policy level, the educational office might be also sharing the educational material to other schools surrounding to the project site. And at large, even the local NGO that are interested on art matters we recently used to decolonize the educational approach, particularly decolonization, the curriculum by itself, the teaching and learning process, because the Western point of teaching is mostly focused on the exam-based exam assessment rather than creating the space students discuss and solve their own problems. And from my point of view, I personally also feel that the decolonization process is also needs something, and it depends on the context. For instance, if we take Ethiopia, we don't have a large decolonization history as other parts of African countries, but still we also have educational system in the curriculum. We face some issues, but I feel that the decolonization approach by itself needs some kinds of context. And also we need to, I don't expect that we need to decolonize everything at the educational systems, because personally, so I feel that especially African knowledge, indigenous knowledge, we do have a lot of knowledge, particularly like indigenous veterinary, indigenous medicine, indigenous herbals, like far more than the decolonial history. And personally, I also feel that some of the knowledge still recently we are getting the Western hegemonic discourses, they were also in past, even African indigenous knowledge practices have been used in different sectors. So personally, I also feel that we need to context it. We need to take some positive aspects and work on the negative points, particularly on decolonizations. And overall, I feel that the art makers, especially the photo voice and theater for development, brought attentions to easily decolonizations, the educational curriculums and pedagogies, and in order to include like local values, knowledge, so that everyone can understand peace from their context, rather than having all the peace discourse from the Western hegemonic. And I feel that hard methods are much more better to decolonize educational systems in particular. Thank you. I will pass chance for you.
Thank you very much, Ketema, for a really interesting, again, thought-provoking presentation with lots of links between practice and theory and research. So thank you. That's been wonderful. what I'd like to do now is to engage all three speakers, all three panelists in a conversation, perhaps with each other as well. So we've prepared a few questions that we thought would be useful for that. And the first one is, what does decolonization mean in your work? I feel that each of you has already spoken to some extent of that. What do you think it means across the different projects as well? Are there observations you have about your co-panelists, presentations, perhaps questions you have, or perhaps do you see that there are, what are core issues that link them? Let me say, and of course also perhaps differences. That's of course also part of that issue. So if I can invite all the three speakers to perhaps reflect and answer that question. I don't know if we could do it perhaps in reverse order. Ketema, if you might start.
There's also some questions on Q&A. Can I go for that or first, or can I?
I think the idea was that we start with a conversation among the panelists and then move to the to open it up to the Q&A.
Okay.
We were hoping to spend around 20 minutes, but I think we can make that shorter as well because we started slightly late. So maybe 10 minutes or so for a conversation between the panelists, because I think it will be really interesting also for our for us, certainly for myself, it will be really interesting to hear your reflections about the other panelists' work and presentations, and then open it up to Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the way the both panelists expressed how the decolonization system will go. As you know, if I start from the first, art and music and drama is like something all the African community have been using many years back. It's not something only for educations. There is different kinds of oral traditions for like parents to share their knowledge and the values to their children. And in arts and matters, especially in agricultural systems, many people use in agricultural systems, music, drama, and everything. It's almost like oral traditions, rooted music, oral traditions, and everything is like different ways in the context as a large. Even people use artists and the music during the war, during the conflict. Even it's a way to communicate and understand each other. For instance, if someone expresses different kinds of oral traditions, riddles, we can understand easily, and we are the way we train, and we got it from our first parents, first mothers. And art and the music is deep rooted into African way of life, lifestyles, and still like people feel that when someone mourn or grieve, there is some kinds of music. When someone happy, when someone gets married, there is some kinds of music. So all the art and the music is dependent with the cultural relationship, the way of living together, harmony, rapport, relationship in context. And I feel also art matters like music and like different kinds of music instrument is also dependent with the African society. So it's also one way of decolonization, different kinds of issues. On second, I also agree on some points shared by the second panelists, especially as already mentioned, the decolonization education system. Still, we are using the educational curriculum of the West, which is true. But personally, I feel that we need to like decolonize the educational system in the way that our people people who are our citizens can understand it easily. And most of the educational system is, as I mentioned earlier, it's almost exam-based assessment, rather than everyone can participate and contribute its knowledge. And personally, I feel that knowledge should be created together, and so that everyone's voice is valued and participate. And personally, I feel that the education systems also need to be decolonized and might be participatory way of teaching and the learning process is much better. On the second, I also feel that, especially from the epistemological point of view, who define peace, and define is based on the context. And for instance, peace in Africa does not mean that peace in Europe does not mean what peace for me as personally might be different for someone who is in East Asia or somewhere. And I feel that we need to ask ourselves also what peace means. Does peace mean like if there is no war, or does it mean that if someone they don't have any food to eat, does it peaceful for that person? So even in African context, there is a lot of difference, diversity on pluralism. Peace might be different in context in Ethiopia. Peace might be different from Kenya. Peace might be different from South Africa, because African culture is very rich and enormous. And I understand that even different kinds of decolonization approach might be need context specific. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, for that reflection. Silvestre, may I invite you to address that question?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to hear from my colleagues talking about the same topic of decolonization. Vole, Ketema, my friends, when they talked about it, I could understand it really properly. I could find myself in their discourse. And what transpires as a common point in all our presentations is really the idea of rediscovering our indigenous knowledges, practices, values, and beliefs as valuable to inform current practices, but also to resolve and address some of the challenges that we have today. And of course, there is a need of reprofiling or customizing to today's context in order to address today's challenges and meet the intended outcome. So the idea of rediscovery and elevating these knowledges to the academic audience and have a conversation around these forms of knowledge. The second idea, which also appears, is the idea of self-expression, as I see, self-expression. The decolonization goes for self-expression because it allows really to share with others what we think is valuable in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of the good and the right, also in terms of the beauty, what is beautiful. The idea of self-expression. Third, I understood also decolonization is a work in progress. Our colleague shared his experience of going for music and be instructed to learn piano instead of learning an instrument that he's familiar with, that his categories, mental representations affiliate himself with. So it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. In my remarks, I highlighted two important concepts, which I want to recall here: epistemic violence and epistemic injustices, where knowledge, forms of knowledge from the West are still viewed, seen as the only valid forms of knowledge. And this has had implications not only in our curriculum, but also in all other aspects of life. So it's a work in progress. It's something we have to work for. And it is a continuous really process. So that's what I would say, looking at all the ideas that were shared by our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvester. Wole, can I invite you to share your reflections with us?
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to hear my brothers speaking. Like I feel like we have the same voice. They package it very well, well packaged. But what I took from their presentation is that we all have one voice, and we suffer from the same thing, you know, whether you're in South Africa or Ethiopia, you know. So I will call it a system. You know, the system established as Africans in many aspects, whether it's education, whether it's culture, whether it's agriculture. But for me, I feel like we agree that we need African voice to be audible, to be loud, and find balance to work with Western. Not that everything is Western is superior. Like we are kind of, we are visitors in our own continent. Brother was talking about the different meaning of peace. The peace in South Africa may not mean the peace in Ethiopia or in Kenya, but for me, I feel it depends on which side of the coin you look at it. But because for us to find ourselves in a area or in an era whereby the peace doesn't define the same thing, it's because of colonization again, because we are divided with the borders and the stuff. But through my experience as a traveler and collecting instruments, around Africa, we have different instruments, but they're the same depending on where you are, the name but the technique on how you play. You find that we are just one big family divided by borders. And it's one of the other things that I always feel like the system, or the matrix, I don't know how the right ways to frame it, but the system, it's well orchestrated in a way that it will take us, because it has been existing for some thousands of years. So it will take us. We cannot just say we crush everything and then we go back to us as an African to live the way we used to live. But we need to find the balance in everything so that we can work together without seeing anyone as superior or intelligent than other one, you know. But I'm just happy that we are one voice. We agree that we need to find balance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we prepared another few questions. I'm just going to shorten this and perhaps just pick one question. And that is, you all gave really interesting examples of your work. And of course, each of you has worked in a really wide-ranging field of projects and themes and countries sometimes. So I'd like to ask you whether you can give us examples for how the arts-based methods helped your participants to gain new insights, or how did they also perhaps help researchers, practitioners, or policymakers to gain new insights? As you're here now, Vodi, may I ask you to start? Is that okay?
It's okay. It's okay. I've worked with so many community students, and I think it depends on where they are, but they are shocked at some point. Some you find them because what normally I present to them, it's something that they live around and on a daily basis, but they don't see it because of the structure that they maybe learn within, and not even aware that maybe a simple stone can produce a sound. And in the older days, we used to play stones and then melody through the stones, you know. So there's awareness that when I go through some workshops and sharing, they always discover that, wow, we never thought of this. So yeah, that's my experience.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Sylvester, may I invite you to perhaps address this question?
Thank you very much. I'd like to take the case of a project which sought to provide mental health support, psychosocial support to young people. And allow me to recognize that this project was implemented in collaboration with the University of Lincoln, with Professor Nanda Breed, Uyisengani Manzi, a civil society organization working in Rwanda, the Institute of Research and Dialogue for Peace, and also the University of Rwanda. We asked our young people to make an image of mental health. What does it mean, mental health? What does it mean, wellness? And with your permission, allow me to share these two images. Are you able to see?
Yes, we're about to see. Thank you. Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Good. Now, these young people, secondary school learners, trying to define mental health, you know. Now, what we have come to notice is that arts-based approaches actually hold an immense potential to allow have access to realities that could not be otherwise known. That's number one. And drawing is one of them. And we also learned that arts-based approaches allow, especially young people, to articulate in their own expressions, in their own symbols, what they cannot express in words, using complex discourses, using complex vocabularies, and piece of writing. For instance, consider these two images. In the first image, I think you see what the young person understands by mental health. You see here violence going on, you know. In the second image, you see also how this young person is trying to portray what mental health means. But basically, what I wanted to say is that our project has shown that in using arts-based approaches, we are empowered to go beyond words. We are empowered to go beyond words. So what words fail to capture, this is captured in artworks. And we have also to remember that sometimes words often fail really to capture the complexity of difficult situations. You know, for instance, gender-based violence, you know, forms of violence experienced and expressed in schools, you know, these are things that cannot exhaustively be captured in words, you know. So the idea is here, is that really, drawing from my experience, arts constitute a successful intervention for people, especially for young people, who may not have a varied and rich vocabulary to express their feelings, thoughts, and imaginations. In short, arts-based methods from our experience has proven that they can open a back door to the inner self and bring light to some concerns which really we could not have access to. That's number one. Number two, we also realize that arts-based methods allow to have multiple forms of expression. So you don't have only one form of expression. You have rather multiple forms of expression. And thanks to these multiple forms of expression, you uncover deep realities which could not be otherwise known. That's the second claim we can make drawing from our projects. Third, we also discovered that arts-based approaches deserve credits because they have this therapeutic, you know, when you draw an image, when a participant draws an image, it's therapeutic. When a participant contributes in the production of a song, a poem, it's somehow therapeutic, it's restorative, and it has an empowering quality. So basically, that's what I would say. Of course, if time was on our side, we would have said more. But I'm happy to share some of these insights again, or other insights with the participants after this workshop, drawing from our projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sylvester, for sharing this. Ketema, may I invite you perhaps to address this question?
Thank you, sure. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, art method is very much better to work with the local people, especially to teach peace and peace educations. And for learning purpose, we, as a society, we develop the educational tools so that the secondary schools can use it, students can use it, and rethink the way peace at the school, and at the same time, the way gender-based violence seen by the context in the curriculum. So I feel that we produce the educational materials, we created co-creation production with students, with teachers, so that students can also feel their voices in the educational materials. The teachers themselves also feel that their voices in the educational materials, so they can use it in order to reduce the gender-based violence and promote peace educations in the secondary schools. For the participants, personally, like we include the participants in both voice, in theater, and different workshop, and I feel that like engaging participants will increase the self-esteem of the participant, especially participant as the one who took the picture for the voice for photo voice, participant as the one who selected image for the photo voice exhibitions. So I feel like participants will increase their self-esteem. And we also created space to speak out their issues to the larger audience, to break out all cultural sensitive information. So we gave them like a kind of space where they speak what they think, what peace should be, and how other people can think gender-based violence and how it can be solved in very cultural way. In addition, it's also a kind of cross-learning, not we as academicians, like creating a space for the local people. We also like bring them all together from different background, youths, women, men, teachers, students. It's a kind of cross-learning. They can learn from each other, even they learn it from each other, because they took different kinds of pictures. Some of the pictures pattern is the same, some is very deep and very critical. So we also provide them like a room so that they can learn from each other, kinds of cross-learning approach. And as a researcher, like I feel like it's a kind of transgenerational knowledge transfer. We promote the knowledge we have as academicians, then we promote to the people so that they can understand and live it and work it for peace education at the educational levels and co-creation of educational materials. And it's also like personally, I think that it's a kind of innovative approach, even furthermore to develop curriculum and education pedagogy in the way that the local people can understand, and also relevant in the way that their voice and their ideas included in the development of science at the large. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ketema, and thank you so much to the panel for all your really, really interesting thoughts and insights that you're sharing. I did promise that we would open up to Q&A, and we should do that now. We already have two questions in the Q&A that I'll just read out. They are both for Ketema, but perhaps yeah. So the first one is, Ketema, how do you envision a more culturally appropriate education system for Ethiopia, given how relatively successful Ethiopia is in terms of academic and technical achievements? And you use the term Western hegemonic discourses. The question is, might that be a better term than colonialism in the context of Ethiopia? Okay, the education system is, so this goes into the nitty-gritty. Let's see. The education system is, I believe, this is yeah, I'm reading out, is I believe the choice of Ethiopian academics and government officials. It's therefore not a simple North-South issue, but also about national differences of opinion. How can these be resolved? This is Mike Powell's question. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of questions actually in there. Yeah, but
okay. Thank you. Like as mentioned, the educational materials or the educational toolkit we prepared is not the educational material at the large to decolonize the educational approach, but we did kinds of research, qualitative research and the art-based method with local secondary schools, and the materials we develop is specifically focused on how local people understand gender-based violence and rethink so that girls can attend schools at the secondary schools. It's not something we prepared in order to bring the full educational system structured in the way that in very cultural sensitive way, but it's a kind of a start, especially to decolonize peace educations and bring like much better space for girls so that they can have class freely. And personally, I feel that, as already mentioned, that yeah, it's for me also it's much better to explain it like as a Western hegemony discourse of decolonization rather than directly using the colonization term. And personally, I feel like, yeah, even though Ethiopia is, I don't think, like as already mentioned in the Q&A, Ethiopia is colonized. Instead, I feel that it's a kind of invasion, but it's not colonization. And colonization and invasion is not the same. So I feel it's not correct. Ethiopia is colonized. Ethiopia is a kind of invasions. Does not mean that invasion is colonizations. Regarding the Western discourse, especially on North and the South, as I mentioned earlier, the educational system is not only the national, the current national or the government can change it easily, because as the continent, even the African continent, all the educational systems is embedded with social, cultural, political, economical factor starting from the colonial era. It's not something nowadays we can change the educational system from the scratch. because there was a lot of factors. For instance, if we see the neoliberal understanding of education, the neoliberal understanding of health and everything, it's not something easily African or as a continent we can change it now, because it's almost very structured. But hopefully I feel that maybe in the near future we work for better educational system and the educational curriculum, but it's not something we need to like working together, collaborating, including indigenous knowledge, values, norms, and participatory methods. But it's not easy way that only the national can change, because as a globalization, we are even living together. It's not something only one continent or one country can change the educational systems. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ketema. There's another question, which is also to you, but I'll read it out, and I think it might be useful for others also to address some of it at least. So Ashike Karen says, during the period I lived in Ethiopia shortly after the war to remove the communist government, I discovered that art forms like painting and music were first invented in Ethiopia. Throughout much of your history, girls and women were treasured. Past military dictatorship and Western interference appears to greatly influence attitudes toward women. How much of your own long history has been overturned and subverted by colonial rulers? And how foreign is this to your own history? I leave that there. And so I know this is a question specifically to Ketema and about Ethiopia. Maybe you start, but I would like to perhaps invite also our other panelists to think about the bigger question about the bigger context of these questions within their own context of creating music and art for Wally and research for Silvestre. Thank you.
Thank you. Relatively the participation of women, especially in decision making, and participating in politics, especially in educational system, and every is much better than the military systems, as already mentioned. And as you know, but there is a variation between urban and rural. And personally, also I feel that in rural part, we need to work more in order to involve and empower women engage in all sectors, including the educational systems. But in most of the cities, it's nowadays much better. But there is a lot of variation in the rural parts. It's not something even in Ethiopia, even in across the African continent. It's something we should do and empower women engage in politics, in government, and in every aspect. But there's still variations. Personally, it's but nowadays it's much better. I feel if Wally and Silvestre can also comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so may I invite Silvestre and after that, Wally, to very briefly come in. And if there's anything at all else you'd like to mention as a closing remark, that will be wonderful. And I'm getting other questions as well, which are a little bit more specific, but we're running out of time. So what I would like to ask you, the panelists, is if you're happy to share perhaps your email addresses, and if you're happy to answer perhaps some more specific questions, whether people are, could get in touch with you afterwards. So yeah, maybe if you are, then perhaps you could share that either with Heidi or in the chat as well. Thank you very much. And then let me pass on. Let me pass on to Silvestre first, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me respond very quickly to this question in the chat, Q&A about are there women researchers in the music field? Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, women are part and parcel of the arts-based research methods, especially music. And what I have found is that arts-based approaches actually are participatory and they are inclusive. And so women are also able to voice their perspectives, their ideas about any topic using music. In a recent project we are concluding, where we are using arts-based approaches to understand sustainable development goals, especially focusing on girls, focusing on unpacking obstacles to girls' access to education and poverty reduction. We produced a collection of songs, and so here music was used. And we found that girls were more inclined to express themselves through music, through songs. If I had time, I would share with you some of the music pieces produced by girls in our project. And it allows them to express themselves beyond words, beyond texts, beyond discourses, formal discourses, traditional discourses that we are familiar with. So it deconstructs those narratives and those other forms of communication. So we are happy to connect and bring you in connection, in touch with other researchers who are using music as a form of research. Now, the last comment I want to make before we conclude is that drawing from my experience in using arts-based approaches, I would like to link decolonization and arts-based approaches, which is very important for me. I find using arts-based approaches as one of the ways of really doing decolonization itself. And this is how. I argued previously that decolonization first has an epistemological component where we have to give value to other forms of knowledges, beliefs, and practices. Now, some of these other forms of knowledges and practices are actually noticeable, are embedded in various art forms and in various artworks that have been produced by the vast majority of Africans, but also understand this more broadly. So these knowledges we're trying to unpack, to discover, are really embedded in various art forms, artworks that have been produced by indigenous people. Second, I argued previously that decolonization involves also the idea of inclusion, giving a chance to marginalized voices, marginalized people, so that they can also express their perspectives. Now, arts-based approaches allow to do that because they facilitate a kind of multiform expression, a multifarious expression. They allow various forms of expression. In other words, why there are a vast majority, the vast majority of people who cannot write complex text in English, for instance, or in any other common language that we might say is a language that's spoken by many people. There are people who express themselves beautifully and perfectly through art forms. And so by looking at their artworks, we can see their perspectives, we can see their voices, we can see their beliefs, we can see their ideas. So I want to briefly say that artworks, art-based approaches actually appear here to me as a good venue for decolonizing education, decolonizing various ways of doing things, art forms is a good tool for the decolonization process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvester. I'm sorry that I'm asking you to be very brief now, because it's such a fascinating discussion that I was not a very good chair and we're overrunning slightly. If Wally is still there, may I invite Wally to perhaps just give your conclusion?
Sorry, I'm gonna just be quick because at any time I can experience the power cut. So for me, there's a lot of women researchers in music, but I feel like we need more. They are not enough, according to my experience, if I can put it like that. So let me just put it this way. I don't have any problem if you share my email and address, and if there's any question that I can address at the later stage, I can do so. But I will ask to be excused because I can be in the dark at any time, so that I can prepare a couple of things. And my apologies for that. That's the state of our country right now.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your really important work with us. Despite the challenging circumstances, we really appreciate it. So what I would like to do is then to invite Heidi, if you can just share the contact details in the chat for audiences, if they would like to follow up on something individually with the speakers. And for me, it's only to thank you all very much for a really inspiring panel. I feel that we've just only started to open up some of the conversations, and it will be wonderful to continue that. Thank you very much to the DIPA project, to Parvati Raghuram and colleagues for bringing us together today and for allowing us to share and join these conversations. Okay, thank you, and bye-bye. Thank you very much to our speakers, most of all.